I'm certain you will have thought of a game when you read the title of this video. There have certainly been a few notable failures. Space games aren't exactly the easiest to get right. Maybe it was Starfield, No Man's Sky, or even Mass Effect Andromeda. But what are the common elements behind these games' failures? And why do they seem to get it wrong so often? Most have argued that these games have too much scope, too little scope, not enough story, too much story, too many spaceships, too many systems, not enough of those things. To be quite frank, the list goes on and on. Nobody seems to agree on what makes these games so difficult to get right.
Because some of these games can be worlds apart.
Albeit worlds, this video is sponsored by... Is your current gaming library boring? Perhaps severely lacking in tanks? Well, download World of Tanks today. Join over 100 million players. That's right, 100 million players in Wargaming's massively multiplayer online game. What is there to do, I hear you ask? Well, you can climb steep hills just like this one, where you can unlock the game's 800 different historically accurate tanks, try out light tanks, super light tanks, tank destroyers, artillery tanks, and the absolute widest of heavy tanks. There are 40 different battle arenas to play in, and if that isn't enough to get you on board, there's even Girls and Panzer. You may be wondering, what's the catch? Surely it must be expensive. Of course not. World of Tanks has never been more free to play than today, right now. Earn experience, modify and upgrade your tanks, all for free. Download World of Tanks by clicking the link in the description below and use my impossible to guess code COMBAT, and you will receive a Cromwell B Tier 6 tank, 250,000 credits, 7 days of premium time, and 3 rental tanks, the Tiger 131, the T-78, and the Type 64. Now, where were we? What even is a space game? Is it a genre? Is it a setting? Well, if you filter by space on Steam, what you seem to get is a collection of titles set in space. Some are RPGs, some are first-person shooters, some are real-time strategy games, but there's blurry lines between them all. But are there common elements that meaningfully make a space game different from any other? Well, to answer that question, I will broadly classify these games into 2 separate categories: space exploration games, and games that are set in space. So what's the difference? Well, the first type, space exploration games, are games that use scope as their main selling point. Think No Man's Sky, Star Citizen, Starfield. Their entire pitch is in the size. 18 quintillion planets, thousands of players, fully explorable worlds. Just endless space. Just think of the endless possibilities. You could be a pirate, a bounty hunter, or a coal miner. The other category, set in space games, are games that could be set pretty much anywhere. IKEA, McDonald's, after 2 AM, your mum's basement. But choose instead to be set in space, and then use that choice to inform the gameplay.
Oh my god.
Here, space is the setting, not the defining characteristic. The story, the mechanics, and the enemy design are the selling points. There are some games that don't fit neatly into these categories, so I won't be able to cover every title with some kind of space element, but I think it will help to figure out where some games get it right and where some games get it wrong. Now that you know the difference, let's start by analysing the first type. The fundamental problem with space exploration games is that they just have too much space. I mean, let me give you an example. Have you ever booted up your Steam library and stared at all the games? Hundreds of them staring back at you. Bought, but never played. Overwhelmed by all the choice. Well, that's the challenge most games in this category face. Why choose when you can do anything, be anyone, go anywhere? But the truth is, developing a good game requires making choices, like setting, characters, story, and features, things for the player to actually experience and interact with. These choices create the limits, or scope, that dictate the direction of development and give developers actionable items to work on. When the project scope just becomes build a fully interactive galaxy, the scale of the project can become completely unmanageable. When the to-do list keeps growing, developers only have so much time to spend ensuring that every part of the game meets a high standard of quality. Something has to give when the game is the size of a galaxy. This usually means copy-paste assets, more repetitive gameplay loops, less engaging stories, etc., etc. But perhaps when it comes to scope and space games, the even bigger elephant in the room would be Star Citizen is an MMO space sim which has had an insane amount of funding and development. $644 million of crowdfunding has been put towards this project. That's more than Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 5 and Cyberpunk 2077 combined. So what's there to show for all of that? Well, that's where it gets complicated. This game has been in constant alpha for 10 years now. The roadmap promises a fully immersive, fully simulated space MMO with dynamic and detailed AI-generated planets and missions. The final release entails 100 unique star systems, countless different player purchasable ships, with fully explorable interiors, endless gameplay systems, object persistence, and servers capable of hosting tens of thousands of players simultaneously through highly advanced server meshing technology. It all sounds pretty great, but it does sound a bit like a wish list, doesn't it? And to be fair, as of right now, it is. There's no word on when the final version will be released, but in this new world of games as a service, maybe it never will be. I've played this game for a couple of hundred hours over the last decade, and by my experience, here's the typical gameplay loop. You'll hop on the game for the first time in a year, wait 5 hours for the update to complete, recreate your character, log in, take the 5-minute commute to the spaceport, get in your ship, take the 20-minute commute to the Amazon dispatch center, and then watch your ship float into the forest because you forgot to turn the engine off. After recovering the ship from its brief escape from gravity, you can now head towards the delivery location. However, the ship may have hit a tree or two in the process and was completely uncontrollable in atmosphere. At this point, you'll crash into the ground, lose all your cargo, and have to start all over again. But if instead you remember to turn your engine off, you'll deliver your Amazon parcel, get some loot, and profit. Nice. Use the money to acquire some mining tools or run some cargo, and then research the optimal selling price for your cargo or ore. All the while, you'll take 20 minutes to go between jump points. Finally, you'll sell your cargo. Bigger profit. Nice. You'll use this profit to rent better tools and sell more cargo for more profit, and you'll repeat until you get bored or your engine overheats and you crash into Louisville on your way to sell your final run of cargo and lose 10 hours of progress. Shit. It's at this point you'll remember why you haven't played the game in a year and decide not to play it again. I guess I'll see you again next year. This has been the gameplay loop for several years now, and it's entertaining enough, but it's hardly a fleshed out game. Is it worth £40? Maybe, but I wouldn't buy it based on the future promise of a finished game. Don't get me wrong, I can see the vision here. It's immersive, it's pretty enough to make my 3080 cry, and is doing some genuinely impressive technical stuff. But once you've gawped at the visuals and you've messed around with your ship, and you've earned enough credits to rent the most expensive ship in the game, and completed all the, let's be honest here, janky missions, what's there really left to do? Not much. And well, this is the big roadblock for space games. Those of you used to say a Witcher-style game or a Fallout-type experience might expect there to be side missions and a storyline, but you're not going to find that here. Sure, it's still being developed, but how much development will it take to make this universe feel alive? To flesh out the world? Nobody's ever done that before. Some might say that the story isn't really what Star Citizen is about. It's more of a life simulator. Think of it like RuneScape in space. You grind to get the bigger ship so you can grind faster. To what end? Nobody really knows. You just do it to get the cool cape with the colours on the back and brag how many gold coins you have. But despite all the amazing tech underpinning this game, the promise of a space MMORPG doesn't really tickle my tricky little dopamine receptors. Let me explain why. These games place too much of a focus on efficiency. I shouldn't have to have an Excel spreadsheet just to have fun here. The enjoyment comes with how you interact with these systems. Say you have a big cargo run and you're worried about piracy. That is an engaging gameplay loop. It's more the risk versus reward, not efficiency over time. So when I'm grinding in a game like Star Citizen, where the gameplay loops are not really fully fleshed out, there's not really any risk other than me just wasting my time. All I achieve is a meaningless number going up. So to make things fair, I'm going to talk about an RPG space game that has been released. Starfield. It has 1,692 planets, but what is there actually to do? The game runs, just about, but the graphics are underwhelming, the story is lackluster, and the exploration is boring. And even after all that, you can't even fly your spaceship to space. Every planet is just a click away. So how is the game exactly taking advantage of the setting? It's no different from fast traveling in Skyrim. The game only has a few hundred activities and quests spread out over such a large area. That means there's no opportunity for dynamic interaction. Planets feel like villages, meaning the density of interactions is just so sparse that you hardly even get to do anything fun. The whole point of Bethesda games is exploration, but exploring a barren field of nothing isn't exactly exciting. It's just a lot of go here and do this thing, and here's a loading screen, cutscene, or another fast travel window. And when that's done, you just go here and speak to another guy, and then you repeat that for 50 hours, roll credits. You never get the opportunity to be immersed when you take a game and you just spread all the interesting bits out across hundreds of worlds. Take any space game with interplanetary travel, and you'll see the problem. There's nothing to do, and everything is a 40-minute commute away. Most of this extra space is just empty buildings you can't access and huge fields full of nothing. The only change is that the density of missions has gone down, so to get stuff, I have to spend more time doing it. I have to waste more time sitting in loading screens and watching a cutscene of my ship landing for the 40th time. I don't really want to do 20 hours of busy work just to access the fun bit. I haven't got the time. I don't play space games to do commodities trading. I log on to get away from the boring things that I have to do in my life. It's to be a space pirate, or smash big ships together, or to uncover the mystery of an abandoned space station, to shit my pants at a scary alien, not to do fetch quests and bring things from one location to another, like in Starfield. Over time, I've learned to value my time a little bit more. I don't really care for games that are huge time sinks, and that's not just because we have a limited amount of time in our lifespans or whatever, but it's because at the moment I only have a few hours a week to spend gaming. And to be frank, as I said in my last video, grinding isn't fun. It's an addiction. The games I like are innovative, not grindy, whimsical, not grounded, and well, for most space exploration games, they're just not those things. The fun is, well, inaccessible. You have to play for thousands of hours just to feel like you've made progress. It's what I like to call the time over fun efficiency problem. If it's low on the time investment but high on the fun, then what you get is a very time efficient game, something that delivers a lot of enjoyment over a very short amount of time. If I was to plot this on a graph, I'd put Star Citizen somewhere over in this top right hand corner. It takes a really long time to do everything, and that makes the fun inaccessible. Time gating parts of the game with gathering resources or travel sequences is only fun in moderation. And a lot of these games include these systems without really understanding why. Star Citizen, No Man's Sky, they're all great tech demos, but they're not games. They're fetch quests and walking simulators and mining simulators, all wrapped into this technologically impressive bundle. They're gorgeous, but these games only make me excited about how they could be used in the future. They're not actually fun now. So, to sum up, at its core, my issue with these games is not that they're not good games, or that they don't have potential. It's that they take what would be a pretty engaging amount of content and stretch it out so much that I feel like they're wasting my time. So, what about the other side of the coin? What do I feel about what I call set in space games? These games lay it all out on the table. They start with the game part and then add the setting afterwards.
Oh my god, look at your friendly fire damage. That's the highest I've ever seen.
They're simple, but engaging. The fun feels a little bit more accessible as a result. If you want a fun, accessible multiplayer, you can look at Lethal Company or Helldivers. I've laughed at these games more than I have any other in recent memory.
I would run, by the way.
But I've only played them for about 20 or 30 hours. Why is that? Well, a full loop only takes about 30 minutes. You land, you piss about for about 5 minutes, and repeat until you give up or get bored. But the difference is, you're doing the core gameplay loop within 2 minutes of booting in. That makes a difference. I feel like I'm actually playing a game, not playing a life simulator. Helldivers, despite some controversies, it has enjoyed a long ride at the top of the charts. That's not because it has 40 billion planets, but because it's fun and accessible.
Oh my god! Bro, what? Lock in, guys, lock in!
Lethal Company is a game that was made by one person, and it's given me more enjoyment than all of Starfield combined. Then there are games like FTL, which I only spent £2 on, but I've probably played for about 1,000 hours. That's pretty much the best investment on £2 I've ever spent. And sure, these games are shorter-lived, the lack of content does catch up to them in the end. Helldivers 2 has player charts to look like that one death roller coaster. Lethal Company has hardly retained its players. But I had fun playing those games, and I will always come back to them whenever there's new content or mods that I want to check out. A bigger scope means more content, and games as a live service are sometimes great. But what players want is an end goal, a well-defined scope, a vision for their game. These decisions need to be justified, and making a near infinite world and then attempting to fill it with stuff to do is a really hard goal. It is something space exploration games, at least in my opinion, have never successfully achieved.
Oh, I love video games.
It is not the number of kilometers you traveled that make a game feel big, it's the attention to detail. Prey, a game that was released all the way back in 2017, is just you exploring an abandoned space station overrun by spooky aliens. A similarly successful game would be Alien Isolation, and these games have immersed me more than a game that has that as their #1 priority. What makes a game engaging and immersive are gameplay loops that have dynamic, player-driven interactions, or engaging AI that learns how you play and makes you really scared. Immersive storytelling with deep exploration and traversal to uncover new secrets. Or it's just the perfect blend of goofiness and horror provided by the real-time proximity chat that always creates perfect comedic timing. What makes it so hard to understand what makes a space game good is that it's not just any one singular thing. It's a combination of these elements that come together to create a fun experience. But immersion and fun are the two elements that underscore any enjoyable experience. I think if I had to sum up my opinions on space games, more planets doesn't mean more better. Quality matters too. Our monkey brains aren't made to deal with the vastness of space, and neither are our computers. But our minds do love interesting stories, new ways of interacting with our environments, and hilarious gameplay loops. How many AI-generated planets does it take to equal the quality of one handcrafted mission? There's only so many rocks you can mine in No Man's Sky before you get a little bored. Because at the end of the day, if simulating real life was so enjoyable, I wouldn't be playing video games, would I?